What's next? It was
Hitmen.
Was it? It was Hitmen. It was Hitmen, wasn't it? Because I just wrote a short story about a hitman, dead pig collector, the professional side of death, the people who kill people but really do care about being caught because they want to keep doing it because they're paid for it. The hitmen, the assassins. The assassin, I mean, as you know, is the corruption of Hashishin. Hassan Sabah founded them in the 1100s in Alamut. But so the story went, they were called the Hashishin because they used hashish as part of their rituals, and apparently that's not true. Marco Polo made that up 100 years later, and then 19th century Orientalists compounded the mistake. It means something else. It's a slightly rough term in that language. But hashishin or hashishia means without any explanation. Because the hashishin or the hashishia were hitmen who operated in public in daylight. That was their innovation. They decided someone needed to be killed, they would do it in broad daylight, in public. So they were about the projection of death without any explanation, which relates obviously to terrorism, but also to snipers and to professional hitmen. The Hashishin persisted way past Hassani Sabah, who died at the ripe old age of 74, having not having gone outdoors for the last 35 years. The cult, there were grand masters, I love that, grand masters of assassins, of the Hashishin. But eventually it fell apart and the Hashishin went their own ways, but the training was handed down. And by the time they got to Europe, the word was corrupted to assassin, which meant, which was taken to mean professional murderer. So this went on for hundreds of years in this style, and the hashish stuff sadly appears to be mostly apocryphal. Although there is a lovely story of, I think it's supposed to be the Grand Master after Hassan Sabah, where they still used religious notions to control the various tiers of hashishin, because there were four, maybe five different levels of hashishin, and they still use the stories about, you know, if you die in the service of the hashishin, then you will go to heaven and everything will be lovely. And this is like 1 or 2 generations down, they felt they needed to reinforce this. So they were very big on stagecraft. They took one of the hashishin and they buried him up to his head in this grand hall. They just lifted up the flagstones and they buried this guy up to his head. And they took a corpse from someone they'd, I don't know, gotten bored and killed earlier, and sort of laid it there so it looked like this guy was a severed head next to his body. Lots of blood around and smoke, and they brought the younger candidates in and this head spoke. The Grand Master had power, you see, from beyond the grave, and he could summon up one of his lost warriors to explain how cool it was in heaven. You know, the virgins and the booze and the drugs and hanging out with God and whatever, you're watering pot plants, whatever the hell you do in heaven. So they did this whole thing with this guy buried up to his neck, pretending to be a severed head that's speaking from beyond the grave. Which worked. And I imagine the conversation, because I know what happened next, I imagine the conversation. They take all the younger candidates out and there's the Grand Master sitting there and there's his mate down there pretending to be a severed head. And the severed head guy is saying, well, I thought that went terribly well, don't you? And the Grand Master saying, yes, terribly well. Yes, that was really very good. There's only one problem, which is, what if they see you walking around tomorrow? And then cut the guy's head off and put it on a spike outside the building. which is the usual end of the professional hitman. Unfortunately, they get hit by someone else. They are no longer useful. They know too much because they've been working for the same clients for too long. Even the most successful, there was this Russian guy who worked through the 90s and 2000s, who is the only guy in real life people know of who would do the John Woo thing with 2 guns. He was the only ambidextrous gun-using hitman anyone's ever heard of. And he ended up getting hit in prison because 2 guns, very scary. 2 toothbrushes, not so much. But I have more sympathy with the professional killers than I do the murderers, as I spoke about earlier, because they're just there to do a job. It's a service. You can't do someone down for wanting to provide a service. And you have to assume that most of the people they killed were annoying anyway.